I remember when I got ready to do steps 8 and step 9, I went to my sponsor. And I said, I don't believe I can do 8 and 9. And he said, why not? I said, because there's some people on my list that I owe amends to that they've hurt me too. And they've hurt me just as bad as I ever hurt them. And I'll be damned if I'm going to make any amends to them. He said, well, Charlie, as usual, you're getting the cart before the horse. He said, in step 8, you don't have to make any amends. You just have to make a list of all you've harmed and become willing to the list. And I said, well, that's the problem. I'm not willing to make amends to all that I've harmed. Therefore, I can't take step 8. And if you can't take 8, you can't take step 9. He said, well, maybe I can help you a little bit. He said, I know a lot of these people on your list. I've seen it. We talked about it before. And he said, there's some people on your list you would like to make amends to right now. Is that right? I said, well, yeah, you know there are. There's my wife and my children, my mother and my father, a few close friends. He said, okay, I want you to take this master list. And from it, I want you to extract those names that you're ready to make amends to right now. And put them on a separate sheet of paper and head it up right now. Could you do that? And I said, well, yeah. I don't see why not. He said, we'll do it, and then come back and we'll talk some more. After a while, I came back and I said, here's the list. What I do now? He said, there's some people on this master list that you're not sure when you're going to make amends to them. But you know you're going to do it sooner or later. Is that right? I said, sure. He said, take their names off and put them on another sheet of paper and call it later. Can you do that? And I said, yeah. And he said, do it and come back. And I did. And I said, here's the list. What I do now? He said, now there's some names on that master list that you aren't sure whether you're going to make amends or not. Is that right? And I said, yeah. He said, take them off the master list and put them on another sheet of paper and call them maybe. Can you do that? And I said, well, yeah, I guess so. And he said, well, do it and come back. And I did. And I said, here's the list. Now what do I do? He said, take those that are left on that master list that you're not ever going to make amends to and put them on another sheet of paper and label it never. Can you do that? And I said, well, yeah, I guess so. And he said, well, do it and come back. And I did. And I said, here's the list. What do I do now? He said, well, you take the list that is called right now and you start making amends to them. And he said, I'm going to bet you money by the time you're through with it, you'll be ready to do some of those laters. And he said, then I'll bet you by the time you're through with the laters, you'll be ready to do some of the maybes. And he reached in his billfold and he said, I'm going to bet you $10. At the time you're through with the maybes, you'll be ready to do some of those nevers. And you know, the old fool was right. He didn't let me block myself off from 8 or 9 with just 3 or 4 different names. He gave me a way to become willing to make amends to them all. And it worked just perfect for me. The main thing in step 8 is we simply make the list, and we've already got it. And then we become willing to the list. And when we do, then we're through with step 8. Now then, let's look at step 9. Step 9 is a definite multiple part step. Step 9 tells us the kind of amends to make. It says we made direct amends. Then it tells us when to make them. It says wherever possible. Now, 9 times out of 10, when I hear somebody read that, as they read how it works, they say, whenever possible. But the step says, wherever possible. Big difference between whenever and wherever. If you tell an alcoholic to do something whenever, hell, forget it. It'll never get done. See? It says wherever we can. That's when we make them. And then it tells us when not to make them. Except when to do so would injure them or others. Now, Bill, in his usual manner, paragraph by paragraph, addresses all 3 of these issues. First thing he talks about is direct amends. Then he'll talk about the wherever possible. And then he'll talk about when not to make these amends. Let's go to page 77. In the middle paragraph, down the center of the page, the 3rd sentence. Now, I don't know why it starts here, but it does. The question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. Now, this is going to be a direct amend, eyeball to eyeball, face to face, one-on-one.
There's one thing other a sponsor can help us do, and I think we need our sponsors more in this area of making amends than any time, all the time. Because we can go out and make amends for something, and we can cause more trouble and more harm by making those amends than we ever did. And we need to counsel on this. How are we going to go about this? How are we going to go make amends? What are we going to say? What are we going to do? We've got to talk it over with somebody. And maybe he would say, if I were you, I wouldn't do it that way. I'd do it some other way so as not to harm them or other people or cause more harm. So we need a counsel of a sponsor even more so in the area of making amends. But the question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. It may be that he has done us more harm than we've done him. And though we may have acquired a better attitude toward him, we're not still too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It's harder to go to an enemy than to a friend. But we find it much more beneficial to us. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feelings and expressing our regret. Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. Simply we tell him that we will never get over drinking until we've done our utmost to straighten out the past. We're there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so. Never trying to tell him what he should do. His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. Now, if our manner is calm, frank, and open, we'll be gratified with the result. In 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the man we're calling upon admits his own fault, so feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we're doing and wish us well. Occasionally they will offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We've made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam. And every time I read that, every time I read it, I think about my cousin Gary. Gary and I grew up together. We got bigger together. And Gary and I were just exactly alike. Every time we got around each other, we physically fought or we verbally abused each other. We just could not stay around each other. So we kind of went our own ways. And the time I was getting ready to make these amends, I was sitting in a restaurant. I've never been in that restaurant before or since. And I looked up at the door and there stood Gary. And come to find out later, he'd never been in that restaurant before or since. And I say, is that odd or is that God? You see? I think God's in all the steps. And I motioned Gary to come over, and he came over very reluctantly. He wasn't quite sure what I might do. And he sat down, and I said, Gary, I joined Alcoholics Anonymous, and I was trying to straighten out my life. And one of the things I'm trying to do is make amends to those people I've harmed. And I've harmed you in many, many ways over the years, and I want to ask you if you'll forgive me. He kind of relaxed, and he said, well, Joe, would you forgive me the things I've done to you? I mean, all that went away just like that. Now, the best part about this is that from time to time, Gary comes to Alcoholics Anonymous. That's almost 30 years ago now. He still comes from time to time. And when he does come, he comes to the group that I attend, and we're able to share a little bit about the program. Had that occurrence not have happened a long time ago, then that experience of ours wouldn't have ever happened. Thank God for the 9th step.
Eyeball to eyeball. One-on-one. The purpose in me making these amends is not to get you to like me. Hopefully you will when I'm through. But the purpose is to get rid of my fear, my guilt, and my remorse. And if I call you on the telephone, if I write you a letter, I'm never quite sure how you received that. But if I go to your office or your home or wherever you are, and we sit down eyeball to eyeball, and I make my amends to you to the best of my ability, I'll never have to worry about it again. You will have done the worst you're going to do to me right then. And when I leave there, I can be completely free of that thing, whatever it is. Eyeball to eyeball. Another kind of direct amend is in equal proportion. You know, some of we alcoholics, when we out there drinking, we tended to run up bills we never did pay. Some of us tended to write hot checks we never did pick up. Some of us borrowed money we never did pay back. Some of us tore up automobiles we never did fix. Many of us have hurt people in many, many ways in the material world. And once again, how are we going to get rid of guilt and remorse for that? It's not going to do much good for me to come to you and say, look, I owe you $1,000. And I know it and you know it too. Would you forgive me? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And you're going to say, well, I'm pretty sorry too. Where's my $1,000? Bill addresses that issue in the next paragraph. Most alcoholics owe money. Now, I think that's the understatement of the year right there. We do not dodge our creditors, tell them what we're trying to do. We make no bones about our drinking. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. Nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory it may cause financial harm. Approached in this way, the most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. Arranging the best deal we can, we let these people know we are sorry. Our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go. For we're liable to drink if we're afraid to face them. I think what he's saying to me is this, that I need to go to you and I need to say, look, you and I both know I owe you $1,000. I don't have the money to pay you today. I wish I could, but I can't. But what I would like to do is start paying you $5 a week, $10 a week, whatever I think I can live with. And you would rather have the $5 or $10 than nothing. And I start paying you the $5 or the $10 a week, whatever we decided upon. And as the weeks go by, I pay you and I pay you and I pay you and I pay you. And someday I wake up and I say, hey, that sucker's paid off. I don't owe that anymore. I don't have to worry about that anymore. I don't have to be afraid of what you're going to say or do the next time I see you. Then I go to the next one. And I say, you and I both know I owe you about $1,500. Sorry I can't pay you today, but I'd sure like to. If it's okay with you, I'm going to start paying you $20 a week. By now, I'm probably making a little more money. And I start paying you $20 a week. And some morning I wake up and I say, by golly, that one's paid off too. Don't have to worry about it anymore. And I go to the next one. And the next one. And the next one. And the next one. And finally someday I wake up and by golly, they're all paid off. And I feel good about me when that happens. This is the way you build your self-esteem. You build your self-esteem by making restitution for the things that we've done in the past. And when we do that, we don't have to sneak around anymore. We don't have to hide from people. We don't have to worry about what they're going to say when we run into them. You know, I had a young fellow that I worked with. He didn't owe a whole lot of money, but he owed a bunch of little money. A couple hundred here, and 300 over there, and 150 over here, and 500 over there. I think it all added up to about $3,000. And I told him the same thing. We start with them one at a time, and we pay them off. And he said, do you know how old I'll be before I get them paid? I said, the same damn age you would be if you didn't pay them. I've lived long enough to know that time is going to pass. You can't stop it. I wish you could, but you can't. And as time passes, I can use it for a worthwhile purpose. Or I can let it slide and let it slide and let it slide, and a year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 from now be in just as bad a shape as I am today, as far as creditors are concerned. You know, this is something we can do if we wish to do so. And I hear some of you saying, well, Charlie, I know that's true for 500,000. But what if it's 50,000? What if it's 150,000? What if it's $500,000? Could we pay that back? I don't see why not. If we're smart enough to steal it, we're probably smart enough to pay it back. You know, I think we forget from step 3 on, God's going to be with us. And if we're going to do these things, and if we're willing to do these things, God's going to make it possible for us to do so, providing we're willing to do that. Joe and I had an old friend named Dan from Tulsa, Oklahoma, finally moved to Bakersfield, California, and Dan died out there. And Dan would have been sober, Joe, this year how many?
51.
51 this year. Years ago, he said to me, he was 29 years sober, he said, Charlie, I paid the last one of them last week. I said, Dan, how do you feel? He said, I feel about 8 foot tall. Now, Dan was a little bitty fellow, about 5'1". He said, for the first time in my life that I can ever remember, I don't owe somebody something for what I've stolen from them in the past. And Dan felt good about himself. When he was an alcoholic, he was in the oil business down in Texas. And he hooked them big too. He come up to Tulsa, got sober. Took him 29 years to pay them back. But he finally got them all paid. I knew him from the day I first came in AA. Joe knew him from the first day he came in AA. Dan and Sarah never lacked for anything. They never had a whole lot of money. But they had everything they needed to live and be comfortable and go to AA and Al-Anon functions. And he managed to pay them back at the same time. Tell you how good a con artist Dan was when he was drinking down in Texas. His wife, Sarah, who became a beautiful Al-Anon. One day she decided that she would commit him to the state insane asylum in Spring, Texas for alcoholic insanity. And she took old Dan down there. And the head psychiatrist interviewed Sarah first. And then he interviewed Dan. And after a while, Dan left and Sarah was locked up.
That's the truth.
She stayed there for a year.
Mm-hmm.
She learned how to live better electrically in those places too.
Yeah.
He was a real con artist.
She told me one time, said, I've forgiven that son of a bitch for a lot of things, but I can't forgive him for that one.
So that tells us what to do about money. Now we're just going to kind of briefly run through this because of the time element. At the bottom of page 78, it talks about criminal offenses. What should we do about them? In the middle of page 79, it talks about where other people are involved. You know, we're going to have to consider other people as well as ourselves whenever we're making these amends. Over on page 80, It talks about where other people are involved, and he went to them to get their permission to make these amends, because there was a possibility they would be harmed by that. Always trying to think of others and not harm people any further. At the bottom of page 80, it talks about domestic problems. Page 81, it talks about sex outside of marriage. What are we going to do about those kind of things? Paragraph by paragraph, he covers all these different things. Direct amends, how to make direct amends, how not to make them. It's going to involve others without getting their permission, and always being very careful that we don't hurt the person we owe the amend to even further, or just as importantly, we don't hurt somebody else. Joe and I both agree that I've never had anybody come to me yet with a question about making amends that we couldn't find the answer somewhere here in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. He pretty well covers the whole gamut of things that we need to know in order to make our amends. Let's go to page 83. Third paragraph. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. In trying to make amends, I would harm those people, or just as importantly, other people. Some of these people are already dead and buried in the graveyard. And the book says we don't worry about them. If we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. There may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble, without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. And one of the greatest mistakes that I see people making in this amends area is we go to somebody and try to make our amends and they don't accept it. And we're just crushed by that. You know, I had some people tell me, they said, Charlie, we didn't like you when you're drinking, and we're not very crazy about you now that you're sober. We'd just soon you get the hell out of here and leave us alone. And if we aren't careful, in our zeal to be forgiven by everybody, we'll find ourselves going back to those people and literally begging them to forgive us and etc. Book says we don't need to do that. We make our amends to the best of their ability, our best of our ability. If they can't accept it, there's nothing we can do about that. The only thing we can do is hold ourselves in readiness. And if the time ever comes in the future where we might be able to make that amend and they might be able to accept it, then we can go ahead and make it. You know, I had one of those in my family. And I so desperately wanted to make this particular amend. And my sponsor said, no. He said, if you do that, you're going to hurt 3 or 4 different people before you're through. He said, you can't do anything about it. Just be ready if it ever comes up where you could do it without hurting other people. And 20 some odd years after I got sober, due to a death in the family, I was allowed then to go to this other person and make my amends to them. And it just worked out perfect. But I had to carry it for a long, long time, because I certainly didn't want to hurt other people with it either. But I never did go back and have to beg anybody. I did the best I could. If they can't accept it, then it's their fault or their problem from then on. People always ask us the question, don't you owe some amends to yourself? And I say, sure you do. Hell, we've hurt ourselves as bad as we ever hurt anybody else. And the finest amend that we can make to ourselves is to make our amends to other people and get rid of that shame and that fear and that guilt and that remorse. And when I do that, that relieves me of the past. And the guilt is gone. And then I can live free and happy. But if I don't make my amends, I'll never be free of that stuff from the past. So I think the greatest amends you can make to yourself is to make your amends to others, build your self-esteem through that, and you start feeling pretty good about yourself. And then we can be peaceful and happy and free, Joe.
Franklin said, put your name on the bottom of the list. You're the last one. I come out of that first marriage, and I'm looking for a woman. And I'm going to drink. I mean, I know that. I'm going to drink. And I need a woman that drinks. That makes sense, doesn't it? And I looked all over and found this lady at the Zebra Lounge. Some of you guys know her. She's the one that took up the collection for the jukebox. You know her. She's the queen bee. Phyllis was known as the queen bee at the Z. Fast Phyllis. She was a pool shooter. I liked her. We stayed out, closed the bars, and we went out to restaurants in the late wee hours of the morning and had breakfast and went to work. That's my kind of woman. We were introduced one night, and she looked at me and said, well, Joe, you look like my third husband. I said, my God, how many have you had? She said, 2. I kind of like that, you know. Well, unbeknownst to her, I had a list about this long that if I had another one, she's not going to do these things. And unbeknownst to me, Phyllis come out of her marriage, and she had a list about that long that this one wasn't going to do this time. Well, ultimately, we got married. And her little daughter came to live with us at 10 years old. And about 11 and a half or 12, she went into her bedroom, the daughter, and basically stayed there till she got married at 17. To get away from us and our drinking and our fighting and fussing. And we're enforcing our list on each other. And it got really sick around my house again. And we couldn't even drink together. So what we did was we made a decision, basically, to split up Tulsa. 41st Street was kind of the dividing line. South is yours. North is mine. I don't bother you over there. You don't bother me over here. We'll meet at home from time to time and visit. That was our deal. But on my side of town, out west, there was a lake called Lake Keystone. And I had a mobile home up there. Nice mobile home. Well equipped. And I didn't think she knew anything about this. And one night about 3 o'clock in the morning, there's a banging on the door. Finally, I go to the door and kind of peek. Well, she just broke in, is what she did. And there stood Phyllis and my little daughter, Gail. And they embarrassed me in front of my girlfriend. Was not having a good time. The next morning I got up and all my stuff was laying out in the yard like it's supposed to be. Stole my car. Had to call my boss 35 miles away to come get me. That was embarrassing. Went to the bank, made off with the money, and filed for divorce again. After all I'd done to her. She treated me like that. Well, now I'm sober, and Phyllis comes into Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, 9 years later, I'm standing at the back of the room one night greeting people, and I turn around, and here's the lady of the mobile home incident. And Phyllis is at the coffee pot. This all happened that quick. Some of the guys knew of the situation, and they said, what did Phyllis say? I said, she didn't say anything for about a week. And the next time we went to a meeting, here's this lady. And the next time we went to a meeting, here's this lady. And eventually, Phyllis began to talk ugly to me. They'll do that, you know. And I began to pay the price again. And about 2 weeks, when she finally did settle down, we were able to talk. I said, Phyllis, when you and I got back together, I told you I wouldn't do those things. And you know that I haven't. I mean, they know. You may not know it, but they know. Okay? And you know that I haven't done those things. And I haven't. And you know that. And I said, I've paid a hell of a price already for that deal. emotionally, spiritually, mentally, financially, every other way you can possibly pay, I have paid. And what I'm trying to tell you, honey, is this. I'm not paying no more. I say it's kind of like last month's electric bill. I paid it, and I'm not paying that one no more. You see what I'm saying? They'll let you pay forever. They will. You get me on the right side of an issue. I'll make you pay. See, we do that to each other, unfortunately. And she went to lunch with that girl sometime later, and I don't know what was said. Don't want to know. But what she told me she said was that AA is big enough for both of us, but our group's not big enough for both of us. Now, how are you going to make amends to this little girl, 10 years, 11, 12 years old? I mean, that really bothered me, because that was the only child. She wasn't my child, but she was my child. I took her. How are you going to make amends to that? I'll never forget the look in her eyes. The book says mumbling off a few words that I'm sorry. That won't cut it. I did that. So what I did was I stayed sober. And I did the right thing as best I could. And I did say to her, Gail, I'm sorry for all the things I've done. She said, it's okay. But that was the end of that. But I knew it wasn't okay. But I lived sober. Eventually, Gail gets married, and she begins to have her children. She moved off to Columbus, Ohio, Pataskala, actually. And I didn't mind her moving, really, but she took my grandkids with them. I really minded that, right? And something happened up there to her sister-in-law, a young woman, and died and left a couple of kids for her husband to raise. And one night, Gail called me, and she said to me, said, Papa, something happened, she told me. And she said, what I want to know is this. If something was to happen to Jim and I, would you take the kids and raise them? That's when I knew it was okay. That's when I knew it was okay with us. It's been okay ever since, you see. Now, I wasn't a very good father, but I'm a good grandfather. Guarantee you on that. You know how to be a good grandfather? Give them everything they want. We have a good family life today, thank God.
Give them everything they want and send them home to Mama. Yeah. Okay, we've talked before about being tridimensional creatures, and we really are. All human beings are meant to live with the dimension of the Spirit. If God dwells in each of us, we got to live with God, whether we like it or not. It's beside the point. The only question is, do we live with God in harmony or disharmony? We have the mental dimension. We've all got a mind. And we got to live with our mind, whether we like it or not. And the only question is, do we live there in harmony or disharmony? We have a physical dimension. And I used to think that was my body. But I realize today the physical dimension is the world and everything in it. And we don't have any place else to live except in the world. Whether we like it or not is beside the point. And the only question is, do we live there in harmony or disharmony? Now, I don't know of any group of people in the world that got in more disharmony with God, with ourselves, and with our fellow man. Our book tells us we were spiritually ill, we were mentally ill, and we were physically ill. And it says when a spiritual malady is overcome, then we can straighten out mentally and physically. And one day in reading through the big book Alcoholics Anonymous, I read something about this is a design for living that really works. And I got to thinking about that design for living and the 3 dimensions of life and the first 9 steps. Now, it looks to us as though the first 9 steps are designed to put us back together as God intended for us to be in the first place. In step 1, 2, and 3, we get right with the Spirit. We can see where we're powerless. We can see the need for the power. And we made a decision to go after that power. And we decided to let God be the director. Now, that's the first time we've had that relationship with God in a long, long time. So we got right with God in 1, 2, and 3. And that removed just enough self-will to let us look into our own minds and see what our problems really are. And through step 4 and 5, we saw the truth about those things. And we saw the things that we were going to need to change in the future. And through 6 and 7, we begin to change those things. So in steps 4, 5, 6, and 7, we begin to get well in our own head, in our own mind, in the mental condition. And that removed just enough self-will to then let us reach out to our fellow man. And through the working of steps 8 and 9, the making of the amends, we begin to get well in the physical dimension, in our relationship with the world and everything in it. Now, if you're right with God, and you're right with yourself, and you're right with your fellow man, then you're probably going to feel pretty good. For the first time in a long, long time. And I don't think it's by accident that the very next thing in the big book, at the bottom of page 83, we call them the promises. It says if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, which phase? The amends phase. We'll be amazed before we're halfway through.
We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we've gone, we see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we cannot do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They're being filled among us, sometimes quickly.
Spiritual experience.
Sometimes slowly.
Spiritual awakening.
But they will always materialize if we work for them. When I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I was restless, irritable, discontented, full of guilt, shame, and remorse, physically a wreck, sick, whole home messed up, finances in arrears, everything. And I come to Alcoholics Anonymous and I began to apply these steps to my life. They told me that I could be reborn. And I have never seen a better description of being reborn than these promises. These promises didn't happen in my body. They happened in my mind. I don't think like I used to think. I experience these things. These are not theories with me. These are experience. I experience those things in my mind. And if you experience those things in your mind, you don't think like you used to think. And I don't want to compromise this feeling that I have today for any reason, because it takes away from me. I've paid a good price to sit in my seat, and I'm not going to compromise anything anymore, so I have to feel that guilt, shame, and remorse. I can't stand it. Sometimes today I get a little bit angry, and I have an emotional hangover for 3 or 4 days. I can't stand it. I cannot stand it to be angry. Just can't. Makes me sick.
I'm going to read the promises again and then we'll be through. I'll read them again for 2 reasons. Number one, I love the way I read them. The real reason is I'm going to add some words to them. And the words I'm going to add to them will refer to the time when I was young, when alcohol was my friend, and I could drink alcohol and be Fred Astaire on the dance floor, and the world's greatest lover in the back seat of a Chevrolet.
A 36 Chevrolet.
36 Chevrolet. This is the way alcohol used to make me feel. Whenever I took a drink of alcohol, I knew a new freedom and a new happiness. Whenever I took a drink of alcohol, I did not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. Whenever I took a drink of alcohol, I would comprehend the word serenity and I would know peace. Whenever I took a drink of alcohol, no matter how far down the scale I had gone, I could see how my experience would benefit others. Whenever I took a drink of alcohol, that feeling of uselessness and self-pity would disappear. Whenever I took a drink of alcohol, I would lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in my fellows. Whenever I took a drink of alcohol, self-seeking would slip away. Whenever I took a drink of alcohol, my whole attitude and outlook upon life would change. Whenever I took a drink of alcohol, fear of people and of economic insecurity would leave me. Whenever I took a drink of alcohol, I would intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle me. Whenever I took a drink of alcohol, I would suddenly realize that alcohol was doing for me what I could not do for myself. Now think about that for a minute. My God, no wonder I love to drink. When you find something that will do that for you, repeatedly over and over and over and over a period of years, you become obsessed with that idea of drinking alcohol. And alcohol was my friend for many, many years. I don't think I could have functioned in normal society without alcohol or something else to give me these good feelings. But one day alcohol turned against me. And all the things that I was afraid would happen now begin to happen because of the alcohol itself. And I became a very, very confused individual. I spent the last 4 or 5 years of my drinking desperately trying to recapture these feelings from alcohol. Not knowing I was alcoholic and not knowing I would never be able to recapture them from alcohol. And alcohol damn near killed me. I came to AA, and you handed me a book. And within that book I found the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I applied the first 9 of them in my life to the best of my ability. And one day I woke up with these promises in my mind. And when I did, I fully realized that the first 9 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are giving me all the good things that alcohol used to give me when it was my friend. That's why I don't drink today. If I hadn't have found it through the first 9 steps, I would still be searching for it or I'd be dead, one of the two. I got all the good from the first 9 steps that I used to get from alcohol when alcohol was my friend. Then came the realization that so far the first 9 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous has never turned against me as alcohol did. I've never been drug into a divorce court because of the first 9 steps. I've never been placed in jail because of the first 9 steps. I've never had the hell beat out of me because of the first 9 steps. They gave me all the good that I used to get from alcohol and none of the bad. That, my friends, is the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. If I didn't find it here, I would have searched for it until I became dead one way or the other. And that's true with every one of us in this room. Mm-hmm. If we will apply these first 9 steps to the best of our ability, we're going to get these promises. And we get the promises, and we don't need alcohol or anything else to make us feel better. That's why we don't drink today. But there's one stipulation. You can have these things under one condition, providing you work for them. Just coming to meetings won't get them. I went to a hospital room to visit a new guy that was being detoxed. One of my good friends in AA is standing on the side of the bed reading to him out of the big book. I said, "Oh man, I'm glad to see you reading to him out of the book. What are you reading?" He said, "I'm reading him the promises." I said, "Did you read him what went before the promises?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, how in the hell do you expect him to get them?" He's going to have to do the same thing that you and I had to do. Apply these first 9 steps in his life. Do the work, the action called for, and then he can get the promises. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you later.
I'm an alcoholic. And it's truly by God's grace and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I found in a book called Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm sober today, and for that I'm very, very thankful. And I've been sober ever since November the 3rd, 1973. For that I'm very, very thankful. And so are a lot of other people. I'd like to read the preamble, please. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy. Neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics achieve sobriety. And I'm going to tell you an Oklahoma joke. Those were Arkansas jokes. You can tell that. But this guy was sitting at the bar, and he's doing like this. This guy next to him said, "Fella, what's wrong with you?" He said, "I got new teeth, and they're too big. I'll have to hold them in." The guy reached in his pocket. He said, "Well, try these on. Maybe that'll help." He said, "No, those are too tight." He reached in his other pocket, and he said, "Here, put those on. Maybe that'll help." He said, "No, those are too loose." Reached in here and pulled out a pair. He said, "Well, try these on." "Hey, that feels pretty good." He said, "You a dentist?" He said, "No, I'm an undertaker." I'm really getting to the bottom of the barrel now. Go ahead, Charlie.
Oh, man. Are you through?
I'm through.
My name is Charlie Parmlin. I'm a very grateful recovering alcoholic. Because I'm a member of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And by the grace of the power that I found through the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous, haven't found necessary to take a drink for 13,017 days today, one day at a time, and for this I'm very grateful. You guys really, really, really do look good. You really do. Just amazes me. You've gotten rid of all your resentments. Got rid of all your fears. You begin to get rid of all that guilt and remorse. You've received the promises on page 83 and 84. And you're a beautiful, beautiful bunch of people this morning. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to try to get through this whole thing today without getting emotional. I probably won't, but I'm going to try. We finished up our particular sessions yesterday with the promises. And if we read those promises very carefully, we would notice that all those promises deal with the mind. None of them deal with the body. And if we came here restless, irritable, and discontented, and if we came here filled with shame and fear and guilt and remorse, if we came here very selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, frightened, dishonest, inconsiderate human beings. If we have gone from that state of mind through the state of mind represented by the promises, then surely we've undergone a great change in our personality. Probably we've undergone a personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism. If we've undergone that great a personality change, then surely by the time we receive the promises, we've had a spiritual experience or a spiritual awakening. Now, if that's true, then what's the purpose of the last 3 steps? If we've already had the spiritual awakening, why would we need to go on to the last 3 steps? And many people will tell you that the last 3 steps, 10, 11, and 12, are maintenance steps, that they're designed to maintain our sobriety. And I'll agree that they certainly will help us stay sober. But the word maintenance itself is a misnomer. To maintain something means to keep it as is. And there's another natural law that applies in our universe that says nothing ever stays as is. Everything in our universe is in a constant state of change. It's either growing or it's dying. It's progressing or it's regressing. You can look outside at a beautiful tree, and you watch that tree, and every day it grows and grows and grows and becomes more beautiful. But one day that tree quits growing. And the day it quits growing, it begins to revert back to where it came from and eventually dies out. The human body is one of the most miraculous things that God has ever made. And it grows and grows and grows and grows till it gets to be about 19 or 20 years old. And then it quits growing. And the day it quits growing, it begins to die. And eventually reverts back to where it came from. Now, everything in our universe is true not only in the physical world, but in the mental world, the spiritual world, and etc. Nothing ever stays the same. This is a beautiful building we're in. But you can spend millions of dollars on this building, and eventually the sucker's going to fall in. It's going to collapse. It's going to be gone. Same thing is true with our spiritual growth and with our sobriety that we've gained through the first 9 steps. If I should try to stop and maintain what I've got with the promises, then eventually I'll start getting in trouble. Eventually I'll start having trouble with people. And the next thing you know, that backs up and I start having trouble with me in my head. And the next thing you know, that backs up and it blocks me off from God. And the next thing you know, I'm drunk all over again. We believe that the last 3 steps are all growth steps. Not only do they help us stay sober, but they're actual growth steps. We've talked about the 3 dimensions of living. We've talked about how step 1, 2, and 3 got us right with the Spirit. We've talked about how 4, 5, 6, and 7 got us right with our minds. We've talked about how steps 8 and 9 got us right with our fellow man. In other words, by the time we get the promises, we have become well, spiritually, mentally, and physically. But twice in the big book, Bill talks about a 4th dimension of existence that they never dreamed of, far, far, far beyond the normal 3. And it's a dimension of living that you can't really describe it. You can't really explain it. You can only experience it. And we believe that the last 3 steps are designed as growth steps to move us into an entirely new dimension of living. Far, far beyond the promises even. So let's take a little while this morning to look at these last 3 steps. And let's see if we can't see whether they're growth steps rather than maintenance steps. Joe?
Let's go to page 84, if you will. That second paragraph. said, this thought brings us to step 10, which just suggests that we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. We have entered the world of the Spirit.
We've had a spiritual experience.
Our next function is to grow.
Our next function is to grow. Not maintain, not stay where we are, but to grow.
In understanding and effectiveness. Now, this is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear.
What step did we look at those in the first place? What step did we use for that? Step 4, okay.
And when these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them.
What steps did we use there? 6 and 7, okay.
We discuss them with someone immediately.
What step was that? 5.
And make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone.
What steps did we use there? 8 and 9, okay.
Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Love and tolerance of others is our code.
It looks to us like if we do step 10, according to the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous, that we're going to be doing step 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 every day for the rest of our lives. That's where all of our spiritual growth came to start with. There wasn't much growth out of step 1. That was just recognition of the problem. There wasn't too much growth out of 2. That was just coming to believe. There wasn't much growth out of 3. That was just a decision. The growth started with the action steps of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Now, I would defy anybody in this room to do steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 on a daily basis and stay where you are. You absolutely cannot do that. See, I've got that inventory sheet right up here in my forehead. I can see it just as plain as day. If I get screwed up about 9 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't do me much good to wait till I go to bed at night to do something about it. Because if I do, I'm really screwed up by nighttime. If I got a problem at 9 o'clock, I've cussed somebody else out by 11, and somebody's cussed me out by 1, and I'm in a hell of a shape by nighttime. So what I finally learned to do is what my book says. If I get screwed up about 9 o'clock in the morning, I've learned to say to myself, okay, Charlie, let's get over here in the corner now by ourselves, and let's see what's going on. I say, who are you mad at? What did they do to you? What part of self was affected? What did you do, if anything, to set it in motion? Which character defect has come back to the surface? I can't really get upset with another human being. I can't get really afraid and worried and depressed unless one of those character defects has come back to the surface. And every time it'll be selfishness, it'll be dishonesty, it'll be self-seeking, frightened, or it'll be inconsiderate. I can spot it immediately. And then I can say, God, you know that I don't want to be this way. Please take this selfishness away from me. Please take this dishonesty, whatever it is. Then I discuss it with another human being as soon as I can, preferably my sponsor. And then I make amends quickly if I've harmed anyone. In a matter of 15, 20, or 30 minutes, the whole thing's gone, and the rest of the day is okay. As we continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear, we learn more about ourselves. As we ask God to take those things away, they become less and less. As we discuss them with another human being, we learn more and more about ourselves. As we make amends quickly, our relationship with the world and everybody in it becomes better and better and better and better. We made a mistake in AA a long, long time ago. The 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous appeared in the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time. They were seen in writing. Now later on, we took the 12 steps out of the Big Book and we put them on little wallet cards, little cards we carry in our purses, and we put them on wall charts and hung them up on the wall. Now that wasn't the mistake. The mistake was when we took the steps out of the book and put them on the wall chart and the wallet cards, we left the instructions on how to work them in the book. And people go to an AA meeting and they read the steps off the wall chart, and step 10 says we continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it, and we assume from the reading of that step that all we have to do is just inventory to see if we've harmed or if we have been wrong, and promptly admit it, and then that's the meaning of the step. But if we look here in the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous and look at the directions, then it's a lot more than just looking to see if we've harmed anyone. And somewhere we got the idea in step 10 that you wait till you go to bed at night to do something about it. Well, now, Joe and I have discussed this for a long time, and I can't speak for him, but I don't get in trouble in bed very much anymore. My trouble is during the daytime, and that's when I need step 10. That's the spot check inventory that I can use any time during the day that I get screwed up. And as I use it, and as I practice it, then my spiritual growth continues. My relationship with God becomes better. My relationship with myself becomes better. My relationship with my fellow man becomes better, and better, and better, and better, and better. Now, if you buy into this, be very, very careful. If you buy into this, then that really does mean that from this day on, you are responsible for the way you think, and from the way you feel, and for the way you act. We don't have to get into that crap anymore, and if we get into it, through step 10, we can bring ourselves immediately out of it, and not only get rid of whatever's bothering us, but to continue our growth as time goes by. Now, if you're anything like I am, there's probably going to be times, though, that you don't want to do this. There are times that I kind of enjoy being screwed up. There's times that I like to be mad. There's times that I like to be afraid. But when I do that anymore, I don't enjoy it like I used to. The reason I do that and enjoy it is it really gives me a comfortable feeling of superiority, or it gives me an opportunity to rationalize and justify. But I don't enjoy it like I used to. So today, whenever I get into this situation, I immediately go to step 10 and I do something about it, and everything gets better and the growth continues. A very definite growth step.
That nighttime portion's over in step 11 anyhow. It's not even in step 10. And once we do this, as Charlie says, and practice the program that's in step 10, we get some new promises. To bottom page 84. And we cease fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time, sanity will have returned. And once sanity has returned, how do we react? We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we'll see that this has happened automatically. You know, our sanity comes back on page 84, by the way. Remember, the problem was that step 1, that we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Step 2 said that we came to believe that the power of greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Well, we get our sanity back here on page 84. And once that's happened again, we will see that our new attitude toward liquor had been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That's the miracle of it. We're not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We've not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We're neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. That is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. And remember again, back on page 45, it said the main object of this book was to enable me to find a power greater than myself which would solve my problem. Didn't say would help me solve my problem. I find the power, and the power will solve the problem. And it happens automatically here. And I don't know about you, but I know the kind of obsession of the mind that I had. There was times I had that enforced sobriety. And I'd be thumbing through a magazine, and I'd see a bottle of that liquor sitting in there, and have that little water dropping down the side. My mouth would water. Charlie said I slobbered a lot. Just looking at a picture. You see what I'm saying? I had an obsession of the mind to drink alcohol. And I work these steps, and I get to this point, and I look up one day, and I say, well, what happened to that? That great obsession that I had to drink is gone. Never to have seriously returned again. Thank God for this program. Now it says it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. It's the only way we can coast is downhill. Can't coast uphill very far. It's easy to rest on our laurels. By this time, if you were like so many people that I know, you may be back home. Be lucky if you were. You may be off the couch and in the bedroom. That would be nice. The dogs quit biting you. You're probably working a little bit now and making some extra money. Probably have bought a new house by now. New furniture, new car, rebuilding it all. I had a friend of mine say, boy, this program really does work. Before I got into AA, nobody loaned me any money. Now I'm in debt over $250,000. If you're not careful, things will start competing for your sobriety. So busy trying to pay for those things that we have to work a little more overtime. Maybe work on the weekends. Can't get to the meetings like we used to. Slack off on those. And you only coast downhill. No matter what you're doing, you can only coast downhill. And things will get your sobriety. I've seen it happen too many times. See, we're not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition.
Now there's the word maintenance. One day at a time.
Every day is a day we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve Thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. Now these are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It's the proper use of the will. All weekend we have been saying the willpower is of no use to us. But you see, God never gave us anything that was bad. He gave us willpower for a purpose. And here's the purpose. Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It's the proper use of the will. You get your sanity back on page 84. You get your willpower back on page 85. Wouldn't it be awful to have the willpower and no sanity? Just in the proper order, we get our willpower back. Now listen, if you will, to the explanation of this next paragraph. It is absolutely beautiful.
We're going to start looking into step 11. And step 11 says we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him. It didn't say to maintain or keep as is. It says to improve. So the step itself implies that there's going to have to be further improvement, not just maintenance. The book says much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction, not suggestion, but direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we've carefully followed directions, we've begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we've become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense. But we must go further, and that means more action. Now here he's referring to God consciousness as being a vital sixth sense of direction. Everything I know on a conscious level, I've learned through 5 senses of direction. I can see, I can hear, I can smell, I can taste, and I can touch. That's the 5 senses of direction. And everything I know on a conscious level, I've learned through one of those 5 senses. But you can take everything that I know, and everything that Joe knows, and everything all you guys know, and everything every human being on earth knows, and add it all together, and it's just a tiny, tiny, tiny speck of information or knowledge compared to the knowledge of the universe. Now, if God dwells within me, and I'm pretty sure He does, my book says so, and if God has all knowledge and all power, I'm pretty sure He does, my book says so, that means you and I have within ourselves all the knowledge and all the power that we can ever need to handle any conceivable situation which might come up in the future, providing we know how to tap into that knowledge and that power, how to tap into that 6th sense of direction, which is all knowledge and all power. Now, it's long been known how you do that. It's nothing new. The human race has known it forever. That you tap into that 6th sense of direction, that knowledge and power, through prayer and meditation. And most of us, when we get here, we're completely bankrupt in those areas. When I came to AA, I knew nothing about meditation. Oh, I had heard that you perhaps lie down and chant certain words over and over and over, or lie down and listen to soft music, or you clear your mind of all thought. Now, I don't know about you guys, I know about me. I've never been able to clear my mind of all thought. When I get up in the morning, that sucker turns on and it runs all day long. I've never been able to stop it. Those are all forms of meditation, and I knew nothing about meditation at all, period. Most alcoholics don't. Most of us are too busy to meditate anyhow. We've always got things going on and churning around in our mind, and we just don't have the time to meditate. I knew very little about prayer. Even raised in church, when I got to AA, I only knew 2 prayers. And one went like this: now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep, and if I die, but I'm not into that prayer much anymore. It's dealing with death, and I'm not too interested in it. The other prayer that I use quite often, and I'll bet some of you used it too, went like this: God, if you'll get me out of this damn mess, I swear I'll never do it again. Now that was the extent of my knowledge when it comes to prayer and meditation. And it would seem to be an impossible thing for a guy like me to be able to develop a life of prayer and meditation. Most people that write about prayer and meditation, they know so much about it that when they write so far above my head that I can't understand what they're talking about anyhow. Thank God for Bill Wilson. Thank God Bill Wilson was a real alcoholic. Thank God Bill Wilson didn't know anything about prayer and meditation. Because if he had known a lot about it, he would have written above my head like the rest of them do. He didn't know any more about it than I did. But what he's been able to do in the big book Alcoholics Anonymous, on 2 or 3 pages, is give me some definite and valuable suggestions that I will, if I will follow them as he laid them out in the book, then I will develop my own life of prayer and meditation. And each one of us individually, by following these suggestions, will develop our own life of prayer and meditation that nobody can improve upon it other than ourselves. One of the most fabulous things I've ever read. He starts out by telling us what to do at night. He starts out by telling us what to do in the daytime, in the morning when we get up. Then he tells us what to do during the day when we're agitated or doubtful. Tells us how to meditate. Gives us some suggestions on how to do so. Let's go to page 85.
Wesley Parrish, who was the inspiration behind this 4-day seminar, I steal from him this morning. He said that communication is the beginning of all understanding. Communication is the beginning of all understanding. For instance, you didn't know us very well starting last Thursday. We've been talking and listening to each other, communicating back and forth. You know us better today than you did on Thursday. A lot better. Well, if that would work with us, wouldn't that work with God? Talking and listening. Maybe more listening than talking. You see? We would have a better understanding of God of our own understanding, through talking and listening to God, prayer and meditation.
Okay, let's go to the first paragraph on page 85 or 86. And here he's going to suggest what we do when we go to bed at night. Now here's the nighttime thing. It's in step 11, not in step 10. And as we go through this, I think you'll see a repetition of steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 again, just like we saw them in step 10.
It said, when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid?
Okay, there's step 4.
Do we owe an apology?
There's step 8 and 9.
Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once?
There's step 5.
Were we kind and loving toward all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time, or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we should pack into the stream of life? But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our usefulness to others. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken.
And there's steps 6 and 7.
Yeah.
So really all we're doing when we go to bed at night, we're reviewing steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 again.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to do this and stay the way you are. Because as you do these things, you learn more about yourself. And these character defects become less and less and less. And our relationship with the world and everybody in it becomes better and better and better and better. So he's suggesting a little nighttime inventory. Now we're going to put a little sheet up here that we made up one time, just as an example of what we're talking about. You've got one of them in your handout material also. On the left-hand side of that sheet, we put the personality characteristics of a self-willed human being. And we took the character defects out of the big book. And we went to the 12 and 12 and picked up all of them we could find in the 12 and 12. And listed all of them on the left-hand side of the sheet. That's the personality of the selfish, self-centered, self-willed human being. We found the opposite of those and listed them on the right-hand side of the sheet. The characteristics of the God-willed human being. Now all we're trying to do is get from the left-hand side of the sheet to the right-hand side of the sheet. And I can take this little inventory sheet or something similar to it. In about 5 minutes' time when I go to bed at night, I can go down through that thing checking those particular blocks on either left or right, whatever the case may be. Now, never have I found myself being able to check all the blocks on either side of the sheet. From time to time, the checking of the blocks will change. One day a certain block, I might check it on the left-hand side, and a week later I'm checking it on the right-hand side. But what I do find is gradually, over a period of time, I'm doing more checking on the right-hand side than I am on the left-hand side.